My name is Gabriel Mitchell, and I never thought I would fall in love with my nephew. Living in the remote countryside of Montana, where our nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, life had always been simple and predictable. I was 32 when my younger sister Sarah died in a car accident, leaving behind her 16-year-old son, Lucas. I remember the day Lucas arrived at my farmhouse. The autumn wind was rustling through the cornfields, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and purple. He stood on my porch, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his blue eyes red from crying. He had Sarah's features, the same golden hair, the same delicate nose, the same way of tilting his head slightly when uncertain. "Uncle Gabe," he said softly, his voice breaking. I pulled him into a hug, feeling his body shake with silent sobs. The first few weeks were awkward. We moved around each other like cautious cats, trying to establish new routines. Lucas enrolled in the local high school, though it was a 40-minute drive each way. I would wake up early to make him breakfast before he caught the school bus, and in the evenings, we would sit in comfortable silence at the dinner table. I ran a small organic farm, growing vegetables and raising a few cattle. Lucas started helping me with the chores after school and on weekends. He had a natural talent for working with animals, especially with our old mare, Duchess. Watching him brush her coat in the evening light, humming softly, I felt a warmth in my chest that I tried to ignore. It was during the harvest season when things began to change. Lucas had been with me for 3 months, and the initial grief had softened into a quiet melancholy. We were working late one evening, trying to bring in the last of the corn before a storm hit. The air was heavy with the promise of rain, and sweat trickled down our backs despite the cool temperature. "You remind me so much of your mother," I said, as we loaded the final bushel onto the truck. "She used to help me during harvest time when we were younger." Lucas paused, his hands resting on the corn. "Tell me about her, about when you were kids." We sat on the back of the truck as the first raindrops began to fall. I told him stories about Sarah, how she would chase butterflies in the cornfield, how she taught me to make paper airplanes, how she always knew exactly what to say when I was feeling down. Lucas listened intently, occasionally wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. The rain began to fall harder, but neither of us moved. Lucas shifted closer, seeking warmth or comfort, or both. In the gathering darkness, with the rain drumming on the truck's metal roof, he looked up at me with those eyes so like his mother's, yet somehow entirely his own. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." I felt my heart skip a beat as his hand brushed against mine. The touch was innocent, probably unintentional, but it sent a jolt through my body that both thrilled and terrified me. I pulled away quickly, jumping down from the truck. "We should head inside," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "You'll catch cold." That night, lying in my bed listening to the storm rage outside, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the truck. The way Lucas had looked at me, the warmth of his hand against mine, the strange flutter in my stomach. It was wrong, all wrong. He was my nephew, my sister's son, a boy I was supposed to protect and guide, not. I rolled over, punching my pillow in frustration. This was just grief and loneliness playing tricks on my mind. Lucas needed a father figure, not whatever these confused feelings were threatening to become. I would push these thoughts away, bury them deep where they couldn't hurt anyone. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the image of Lucas in the rain, his golden hair darkened by water, his eyes reflecting the storm clouds above. The weeks that followed were torture. I tried to maintain a proper distance from Lucas, but farm life made that nearly impossible. We worked side by side every day, our shoulders brushing as we fed the animals, our hands meeting as we passed tools back and forth. Each accidental touch felt like electricity. Lucas seemed to grow more beautiful every day, though I hated myself for noticing. He was flourishing in the country air, his skin tanning from outdoor work, his muscles developing from the physical labor. Sometimes I would catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, his gaze lingering a moment too long. One Saturday morning in early winter, we were repairing the barn roof. Snow was forecast for the following week, and we needed to fix the loose shingles before the bad weather hit. Lucas was handling the nails while I worked with the hammer. "You've got sawdust in your hair," he said suddenly, reaching out to brush it away. His fingers grazed my temple, and I jerked back so violently I nearly lost my balance on the roof. "Uncle Gabe?" His voice was hurt, confused. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said quickly, too quickly. Just hand me another nail." That evening, Lucas cornered me in the kitchen as I was washing dishes. "Why are you avoiding me?" "I'm not avoiding you," I lied, keeping my eyes on the soapy water. "Yes, you are." His voice was firm, more adult than I'd ever heard it. "You barely look at me anymore. You flinch when I come near you. What changed?" I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white. "Nothing's changed, Lucas. You're imagining things. Don't lie to me." His voice cracked with emotion. "I'm not stupid, Uncle Gabe. I see the way you look at me when you think I won't notice. I feel it too." The plate I was washing slipped from my hands, shattering in the sink. The crash seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the kitchen. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "You don't know what you're saying," I managed to whisper. "I do." He stepped closer, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I've known for weeks." "Lucas, stop." My voice was pleading now. "You're 16. You're my nephew. This conversation can't happen. Age is just a number," he said softly. "And blood doesn't dictate love." "Love?" The word came out as a strangled laugh. "This isn't love, Lucas. This is confusion and grief and isolation. You're still mourning your mother, and I'm the only person you see regularly. It's natural to develop confused feelings, but stop telling me what I feel." His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist, forcing me to turn and face him. "I know my own heart, Uncle Gabe. I'm young, but I'm not a child." In his eyes, I saw a determination that terrified me. He was so close now, close enough that I could see the light dusting of freckles across his nose, could smell the pine and hay scent that clung to his clothes from working in the barn. "This is wrong," I whispered, but I didn't pull away. "Then why does it feel so right?" His free hand came up to cup my cheek, and I closed my eyes, trembling. "Look at me, Uncle Gabe. Please." I opened my eyes, and in that moment, I was lost. The love and desire in his gaze mirrored everything I'd been trying to suppress. When his lips met mine, it was like coming home and falling apart all at once. The kiss was gentle, hesitant, nothing like the desperate clash of passion I'd feared. His lips were soft, slightly chapped from the cold winter air. I knew I should push him away, knew this was the moment to stop this madness, but my body betrayed me. My hands came up to cradle his face, thumbs stroking his cheekbones as I deepened the kiss. The sound of a car passing on the distant road broke the spell. I jerked away from Lucas as if burned, stumbling backward until I hit the counter. "Oh God," I breathed, horror washing over me. "Oh God, what have I done?" "Uncle Gabe, please don't." "Go to your room," I cut him off, my voice shaking. Just go." He stood there for a moment, hurt and defiance warring on his face, before turning and running upstairs. I heard his door slam, and only then did I let myself slide to the kitchen floor, head in my hands. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced my room, thinking about calling the police on myself, about sending Lucas to live with our distant cousins in Oregon, about driving my truck into the river. By dawn, I had made no decisions except that I needed to be stronger, to be the adult, to keep my distance no matter what. But farm life conspired against my resolutions. The next morning, a pipe burst in the barn, flooding the lower level where we kept the feed. Lucas and I had to work together to save what we could, standing knee-deep in icy water, passing heavy bags back and forth. Every time our hands touched, every time our eyes met, I felt the electricity between us. "We need to talk about what happened," Lucas said finally, as we sat exhausted on hay bales after the cleanup. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied firmly. "It was a mistake. It can never happen again. You can't just decide that for both of us." His voice was quiet, but determined. "What I feel for you, it's real, Uncle Gabe, and I know you feel it too. What I feel doesn't matter." I stood up, needing to put distance between us. "I'm the adult here. I'm responsible for your safety, your well-being. Whatever this is, it has to stop." "I'm not asking you to act on it," he said, following me as I walked toward the barn door. "I just want us to be honest with each other. This pretending is killing me." I stopped, my hand on the doorframe. "What do you want from me, Lucas? To admit that I have inappropriate feelings for my teenage nephew? That every time I look at you, I hate myself a little more?" That I've betrayed your mother's trust in the worst possible way? I want you to stop punishing yourself, he said softly, and to stop punishing me. I turned to face him, and my heart nearly stopped. The winter sunlight streaming through the barn windows caught his hair, creating a golden halo around his head. He looked so young and so old at the same time, his face open and vulnerable, yet somehow wise beyond his years. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting you. From what? From love? From me. The words burst out louder than I intended. From this situation that could ruin your life. Do you have any idea what would happen if anyone found out? I'd go to jail. You'd be stigmatized. Our family name would be destroyed. Nobody has to know, he whispered, stepping closer. It can be our secret, just until I'm 18. Then we can. Then we can what? I laughed bitterly. Run away together? Live happily ever after? This isn't a romance novel, Lucas. This is real life. And in real life, relationships like this destroy people. The only thing destroying us is your fear, he said, reaching for my hand. This time, I let him take it. I'm not asking for anything physical, Uncle Gabe. I just want to stop pretending that this connection between us doesn't exist. I looked down at our joined hands, at the contrast between his smooth skin and my work-roughened fingers. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I don't know how to feel what I feel for you and still be the guardian you need. Then we'll figure it out together, he said simply. The next few months were a delicate dance of unspoken feelings and careful boundaries. We established new rules. No touching beyond what was necessary for farm work, no being alone in enclosed spaces, doors always left open. It wasn't perfect, but it was a compromise we could both live with. Winter deepened, and the farm fell into its quiet season. The long evenings were the hardest, when we sat in the living room, Lucas doing his homework while I pretended to read. Sometimes our eyes would meet across the room, and the air would grow thick with everything we couldn't say. One particularly cold night in February, the power went out during a blizzard. The temperature in the house dropped rapidly, and we had to huddle in the living room near the fireplace for warmth. I dragged mattresses downstairs, placing them carefully apart, but as the night wore on and the cold intensified, Lucas began to shiver violently. This is ridiculous, he said through chattering teeth. We'll freeze to death trying to maintain propriety. Lucas, I started, but he cut me off. I promised to behave, Uncle Gabe. But please, I'm so cold. With a heavy sigh, I lifted my blanket in invitation. He scrambled over, pressing his ice-cold feet against my legs. We lay there in silence, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle in the hearth. Despite my fears, there was nothing sexual about the moment. It was pure survival, two humans sharing warmth in the darkness. Tell me about the first time you realized you liked boys, Lucas whispered after a while. I stiffened, but then forced myself to relax. If we were going to be honest with each other, this conversation was inevitable. I was 14, I said quietly. There was a boy in my class, Michael Stevens. He had the most beautiful hands I'd ever seen. I used to watch him take notes in class, the way his fingers curved around his pencil. Did anything ever happen between you? No. I never told anyone how I felt. Back then, in this rural area, it wasn't something you could be open about. I dated girls through high school, tried to convince myself I was normal. You are normal, Lucas said fiercely. There's nothing wrong with who you are. I smiled sadly in the darkness. The world doesn't always see it that way, especially not here. Is that why you never left? Never had any relationships? Partly, I admitted. It was easier to stay here, run the farm, keep to myself. Your mother was the only one who knew. She figured it out when I was 20, caught me looking at a male farmhand a bit too long. She was incredibly supportive. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. She would have understood about us, you know? No, I said firmly. She would have wanted me to protect you, to be the uncle you deserve. Maybe she would have wanted you to be happy, he countered. Both of us to be happy. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks up the chimney. Happiness isn't always simple, Lucas. Sometimes it comes with too high a price. And sometimes, he said softly, the price of denying it is even higher. I had no answer for that. We fell into silence, and eventually, Lucas's breathing evened out as he fell asleep. I lay awake, watching the firelight play across his peaceful face, feeling both blessed and cursed by this love that could never be. The power came back on the next morning, and we returned to our careful distance. but something had shifted between us. There was a new understanding, a shared acknowledgement of our feelings that made them somehow easier to bear. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it new challenges. Lucas turned 17 in March, and the question of college applications loomed over us. Part of me wanted him to go far away, to escape this complicated situation and find a normal life. Another part, the selfish part I tried to suppress, dreaded the thought of losing him. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Lucas brought up the subject. "I've been thinking about college," he said, carefully drying a plate. "There's a good agricultural program at Montana State. It's only 3 hours away." My hands stilled in the soapy water. "You don't have to stay close because of me, Lucas. You should apply wherever you want. I want to learn about farming," he insisted. "I want to help modernize this place, make it more sustainable. That's not just about you, Uncle Gabe. This is my home now, too." I looked at him then, really looked at him. He'd grown taller over the past months, his shoulders broader, his jaw more defined. But it was the quiet confidence in his eyes that struck me most. He wasn't the broken boy who'd arrived on my doorstep anymore. "Your mother always wanted you to see the world," I said softly, "to have opportunities she never had. Maybe my world is here." He set down the dish towel and turned to face me fully. "I know what you're doing, Uncle Gabe. You're trying to push me away because you think it's best for me. But have you considered that staying might be what's best?" "Lucas, no, let me finish. I'm not staying because of what I feel for you, though I won't pretend that's not part of it. I'm staying because this is where I belong. These fields, these animals, this life, it's in my blood. Just like it's in yours." I couldn't argue with the truth in his words. The farm was as much a part of him now as it was of me. I'd watched him bloom here, seen him find purpose in the daily rhythms of agricultural life. Spring turned to summer, and Lucas threw himself into college applications while maintaining his share of the farm work. We settled into a comfortable routine, our feelings acknowledged but contained, like a river channeled between careful banks. One hot afternoon in July, we were working in the vegetable garden when Lucas suddenly said, "I got accepted to Montana State." I straightened up from where I'd been weeding, wiping sweat from my forehead. That's wonderful, Lucas. Congratulations." He beamed at me, his face flushed from the heat and excitement. "I start in September. I can come home on weekends sometimes, help with the harvest. You should focus on your studies," I said automatically. But my heart leaped at the thought of him considering this place home, of him wanting to return. "I'll have plenty of time for both." He moved closer, lowering his voice even though we were alone. "Uncle Gabe, I need you to know something. These feelings I have for you, they're not going away. I've tried dating at school, tried to be interested in people my own age, but—" "Lucas, don't," I pleaded. "I have to say this," he insisted. "I'm not asking for anything to change right now. I understand why we can't be together. But in a year and a half, when I'm 18 and legally an adult, we can't plan for that," I interrupted. "A lot can change in a year and a half. You'll meet new people at college, have new experiences. These feelings you think you have, stop telling me what I feel isn't real." His voice rose in frustration. "I'm not some lovesick teenager with a crush. What I feel for you is deep and real and lasting. And I know you feel the same way." Standing there in the garden, with the summer sun beating down and the scent of tomato plants heavy in the air, I couldn't deny his words. What I felt for Lucas had only grown stronger with time, deepening into something that terrified me with its intensity. "You're right," I admitted quietly. "What I feel for you is real, too real. That's what makes it so dangerous." He took a step closer, and I could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "I'm not asking you to act on it now. I'm just asking you to wait for me, to give us a chance when the time is right." Before I could respond, the rumble of an approaching truck interrupted us. It was Tom Henderson, our nearest neighbor, coming to borrow some tools. We quickly stepped apart, returning to our work with practiced casualness. The summer passed too quickly after that. Lucas spent his days alternating between farm work and preparing for college. I watched him pack his belongings with a mixture of pride and heartache, knowing that his departure would both relieve and torture me. The day we drove him to Montana State was overcast, threatening rain. We loaded his few boxes into my truck in silence, both aware of the weight of the moment. The 3-hour drive felt both too long and too short. As we unloaded his things at the dormitory, I tried to maintain a proper uncle-nephew relationship in front of the other families doing the same. But when it came time to say goodbye, Lucas pulled me into a fierce hug. "Remember what I said," he whispered in my ear. "Wait for me." I drove home alone through the rain, the truck feeling impossibly empty without him beside me. The farm seemed to echo with his absence. His boots no longer by the door, his jacket no longer hung on its peg, his voice no longer filling the quiet spaces. He called regularly, telling me about his classes, his new friends, the agricultural techniques he was learning. I lived for those calls, even as I tried to maintain appropriate boundaries. Sometimes, late at night, he would talk about us, about his unchanging feelings, about the future he imagined. I never encouraged these conversations, but I couldn't bring myself to stop them either. The months crawled by. Lucas came home for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for occasional weekends. Each visit was a sweet torment. Having him close again, watching him mature into an even more remarkable young man, feeling the constant pull between us. Spring semester of his freshman year, he called me late one night, his voice excited. "Uncle Gabe, I've been thinking about the farm. I've learned about some new sustainable farming techniques we could implement. I've even drawn up some plans. Can I show you this weekend?" "Of course," I said, trying to ignore how my heart raced at the thought of seeing him. "But Lucas, you should be focusing on your social life too. College is about more than just studying." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I've been on a few dates," he said finally. "Nothing serious, nothing that changes how I feel about you." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "Lucas, I know. We can't talk about that. But I'm not going to lie to you either. Every day that passes, every new person I meet, every experience I have, it all just confirms what I already knew. What we have is special, Uncle Gabe. It's real." As Lucas's freshman year drew to a close, spring bloomed across the farm in a riot of color. He came home for summer break, bringing with him new ideas and an even stronger sense of purpose. The boy who had arrived, broken on my doorstep 2 years ago, was now a confident young man with clear vision for his future. We implemented some of his sustainable farming ideas, working side by side to install a new irrigation system and plant cover crops. The physical work kept us busy and helped maintain appropriate distance, but the underlying tension remained. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lucas broke our unspoken rule about discussing our feelings. "I'll be 18 in 8 months, he said quietly. "Lucas, please don't. We need to talk about this," he insisted. "I've respected your boundaries, Uncle Gabe. I've waited patiently, but I'm not a child anymore, and soon there won't be any legal or moral barriers between us." I gripped the arms of my chair, knuckles white. "There will always be moral barriers. I'm still your uncle. I'm still twice your age. I'm still the person who was supposed to protect you. You have protected me," he said firmly. "You've given me a home, taught me about farming, helped me find my path in life. But you've also shown me what real love looks like. Patient, selfless, willing to wait." "That's not." "It is," he interrupted. "What you've done, holding back your feelings, putting my needs first, that's real love, Uncle Gabe. And what I feel for you is just as real. I've had time to explore, to date other people, to make sure this isn't just some misplaced feeling or teenage infatuation." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. In the growing darkness, I could barely make out Lucas's face, but I could hear the determination in his voice. "When I turn 18, he continued, "I'm going to ask you to give us a chance. Not as uncle and nephew, but as 2 adults who love each other. I know it won't be easy. I know we'll have to be careful, keep it private. But I'm willing to accept those conditions if it means we can be together." "And what about your future?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What about having a normal life, a family, a relationship you don't have to hide? My future is here, with you and this farm. As for family," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "There are many ways to build a family, Uncle Gabe, and love that has to be kept private isn't necessarily less real or meaningful." I stood up abruptly, needing to move to think. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," he acknowledged, rising to stand beside me. "But the best things in life rarely are. You taught me that, in the last light of day, I could see the man he was becoming, strong, thoughtful, sure of himself and his choices. Part of me wanted to push him away again, to insist he find someone his own age, someone he could love openly. But another part, growing stronger with each passing day, wondered if he was right. If love, in whatever form it took, was worth the complexity and sacrifice it demanded. 8 months, he said softly. That's all I'm asking you to wait. Then we can decide together as equals what our future looks like. The next 8 months passed both agonizingly slowly and alarmingly fast. Lucas returned to college for his second semester, excelling in his studies while continuing to develop plans for the farm's future. Our phone calls remained frequent but careful, focused mainly on practical matters and his education. March approached, bringing with it Lucas's 18th birthday. He decided to spend it at school, saying he didn't want to make a big deal of it. But we both knew the real reason. The weight of that milestone was too heavy for casual celebration. The day after his birthday, he called me late in the evening. I'm officially an adult now, he said without preamble. I sat heavily in my kitchen chair, the phone pressed to my ear. Yes, you are. I haven't changed my mind, Uncle Gabe. About any of it. I know. The words came out barely above a whisper. Have you changed your mind? I closed my eyes, thinking of all the nights I'd lain awake wrestling with this question. No, I admitted finally. But Lucas, we need to be very clear about what we're considering here. This won't be easy. We'll have to be extremely careful. No one can ever know. I understand, he said solemnly. I've thought about all of that. I'm prepared for what it means. Are you? Really? This would mean no public displays of affection, no introducing each other as partners, no sharing our relationship with friends or family. Always being on guard, always hiding. I know, he replied. But being with you, having this farm together, building a life, that's worth any sacrifice to me. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, I asked, when are you coming home next? This weekend. I didn't want to pressure you, but I arranged to have Friday off from classes. Okay, I said, my heart pounding. We'll talk then, really talk about everything. That Friday dawned clear and cold. I kept busy with farm work, trying not to watch the clock, trying not to think about what the day might bring. When I heard his truck coming up the drive in the late afternoon, my hands were shaking so badly I had to set down the feed bucket I was carrying. Lucas got out of his truck slowly, looking somehow both younger and older than his 18 years. We stood facing each other in the yard, the late winter sun casting long shadows around us. Hi, he said simply. Hi, I responded, my voice rough. He took a step forward, then stopped. Before we talk about anything else, I need you to know something. Whatever you decide, whatever happens between us, this is still my home. I'm still coming back here after college to help run this farm. That doesn't change. The knot in my chest loosened slightly at his words. This will always be your home, Lucas. No matter what. He nodded, then took another step closer. And now, I looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who had grown from that broken boy. At the strength and certainty in his eyes. At the love that had somehow bloomed in the most unlikely of places. And I made my choice. Now, I said softly, we take it one day at a time. Together. He closed the remaining distance between us, slowly, giving me time to step away if I needed to. But I didn't. When his hand found mine, our fingers intertwining, it felt like coming home. We stood there as the sun set, holding hands in the gathering darkness, both knowing that our path forward wouldn't be easy. But we had the farm, we had each other, and we had time. For now, that was enough.